Good morning, children. Hope all of you are fine and safe at your home. Children, in the previous class, we have discussed about the ethnic complexities of Sri Lanka and Belgium and how these two countries faced that problem. In Sri Lanka, we can see that government adopted the policy of majoritarianism and hence there was civil war. But in Belgium, government adopted the policy of power sharing. Today, we will discuss about why power sharing is desirable and what are the different forms of power sharing. Now, let's discuss about the topic why power sharing is desirable. There are two reasons. One is prudential and another one is moral reason. Then what is the difference between prudential and moral? When we talk about prudential, we focus more on the outcomes of power sharing. Here we will calculate outcomes of power sharing. Will the conflicts come down? Will they able to create more stability in the political setup? Will majority undermine the rights of minorities, etc.? So prudential is based on prudence or on careful calculation of gain and loss. Under prudential reason, we can tell power sharing is good because it helps to reduce the possibility of conflict between social groups. Secondly, power sharing is a good way to ensure the stability of political order. So, what are the prudential reasons of power sharing? First one, it reduces the possibility of conflict between different social groups. And secondly, it is a good way to ensure the stability of political order. Next is moral reason of power sharing. Here, we emphasize that act of power sharing is more valuable. So here we are not focusing on the outcomes. In the moral reason, we can tell that power sharing is the very spirit of democracy. It means a democratic rule involves sharing power with those affected by its exercise and who have to live with its effects. Here people have a right to be consulted on how they are to be governed. It means that a democratic government must be accountable and responsive to the needs of the citizens, and here people have more rights. Next we will discuss about the topic forms of power sharing. Children, there are different forms of power sharing like horizontal form of power sharing, vertical form of power sharing or federal system. Then there is power sharing among different social groups and power sharing among political parties, pressure groups and movements. First about horizontal distribution of power. Here power is shared among different organs of government. Children, do you remember which are the different organs of the government? Legislature, executive and judiciary. So in this form of power sharing, each organ such as this legislature, executive and judiciary placed at same level to exercise different powers. For example, this legislature, they have to make laws. Executive, they have to implement or execute the laws. And the judiciary, they have to enforce these laws. So such a separation ensures that none of these organs can exercise unlimited power. Each organ checks the others. This results in a balance of power among various institutions. In this system, for example, even though ministers and government officials exercise power, but they are responsible to the parliament or state assemblies. Similarly, although these judges are appointed by the executive, but they can check the functioning of the executive or laws made by the legislature. So here we can see each organ checks the functioning of others. This arrangement is called the system of checks and balances. Next form of power sharing is vertical distribution of power. Here, power can be shared among governments at different levels. A general government for the entire country and governments at the provincial or regional level. Such a general government for the entire country is usually called federal government. In India, we refer to it as the central or union government. Then the governments at the provincial or regional level are called by different names in different countries. In India, we can call them as state governments. So, in India, we can see governments at different levels such as central government for the entire country, state governments for particular state, and local governments such as the panchayat and municipalities for local administration. This arrangement of power sharing between different levels of government is called federal system or federalism. Third one is power sharing among different social groups such as the religious and linguistic groups. Community government in Belgium is a good example of this arrangement. Do you remember what is community government? Community government is a special government appointed in the country Belgium in order to look after the cultural, educational and linguistic matters of different groups such as Dutch, French and German people. This community government is a good example of this arrangement. In some countries, there are constitutional and legal arrangements whereby socially weaker sections and women are represented in the legislature and administration. For example, in India, we can see the system of reserved constituencies in the assembly and the parliament. This type of arrangement is meant to give space in the government and administration to diverse social groups who otherwise would feel alienated from the government. This method is used to give minority communities a fair share in power. Power sharing arrangement can also be seen in the way political parties, pressure groups and movements. First, about power sharing among different political parties. In contemporary democracies, this takes the form of competition among different parties. Such competition ensures that power does not remain in one hand in the long run. Power is shared among different parties that represent different ideologies and social groups. Sometimes we can see two or more parties form an alliance to contest elections. If their alliance is elected, they form a coalition government and thus power is shared among political parties in the direct way. So, we can see this power in this electoral competition, power does not remain in one political party alone, it will change. And in a democracy, we can see different interest groups such as those of traders, businessmen, farmers, etc. They also will have a share in the governmental power either through participation in governmental committees or bringing influence on the decision-making process. Children, we have successfully completed this chapter. In the first part of this lesson, we have discussed about the ethnic complexities of two countries, that is Belgium and Sri Lanka, and how these two countries solve the problem of this ethnic complexity. In the Belgium government, they amended the constitution and they adopted the method of power sharing. and give importance to each social groups. But at the same time, Sri Lankan government adopted the policy of majoritarianism. They gave importance to majority community alone by undermining the minorities. So this is against the spirit of democracy. And next we have discussed about the topic why power sharing is desirable. There are two reasons, prudential reason and moral reason. Under prudential reason we can tell power sharing ensures stability and it reduces the possibility of conflict. And in the moral reason we can tell power sharing is the very spirit of democracy, and it ensures it give more rights to its citizen, and a democratic government must be accountable and responsive to its citizen. And at last we have discussed about what are the different forms of power sharing. There are four forms of power sharing. First one is horizontal form of power sharing. Here power is shared among different organs of the government such as legislature, executive and judiciary. And this horizontal form of power sharing is also known as the system of checks and balances. And next we have discussed about vertical form of power sharing. Here power is shared among different levels of government, that is central government, state government and local government. And next we have discussed about power sharing among different social groups. The best example is community government in Belgium. And next we have discussed about power sharing among different political parties, pressure groups and movements. Let me conclude today's session. For your reference, I have uploaded the URL. Go through it. Notes are also attached along with this. Check it down. A test question paper is also there. Try it yourself. Thank you.